As a young adult with no kids, I genuinely have no idea what children are watching anymore. Like, I hear about the Skibbity Toilet, I know about Roblox, so I kind of have an idea. But their media has actually changed so much since I've aged out of that sort of content. And kids aren't entertaining themselves the way that we used to in the 90s and early 2000s. It's not just that there's more platforms available, although that's also a huge factor. The content is also just different. Who they're watching, what they know about, and who they're exposed to, it's all so different and it's changed so much. Now it's so normal to see a parent post their kid at a Sabrina Carpenter concert or an Olivia Rodrigo concert, and they'll be screaming lyrics that they clearly do not know the meaning of. Watching streamers that curse and gamble or just have more mature content because they're not making content aimed at kids.
What'd you say? Fuck the woman! Fuck the woman!
What? No, wait. We love women. We love women. We love women.
But not like transgenders.
Yes, sir. We love everybody. No.
All gays should die.
Yeah, merch, preach. What have I done? What have I done?
They know all the internet personalities, the latest memes. They're pretty much keeping up with the same online culture as adults are. And honestly, none of this is necessarily shocking by itself, since the internet has become so much more accessible and that line between adult versus kid friendly has become a lot more blurry. I mean, I'm sure we all listen to music that we shouldn't have at a younger age. But the thing that got me was this video that I saw on my TikTok feed.
Hey, what's your favorite cartoon? No, cartoon.
Cartoon?
Mm-hmm. You want cartoon?
What is cartoons?
Man, what? I'm not that old.
Is it like when they have ads?
What? You ain't never seen Tom and Jerry? Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon. Hey Arnold, you ain't never seen Disney Channel?
And that was really what did it for me, because growing up, that question would have been the easiest thing in the world to answer. One of my favorite things to do as a kid was watch cartoons. So I would have had a full list ready. SpongeBob, Kim Possible, Fairly Odd Parents, Rugrats. The list goes on. Cartoons felt like the default entertainment for kids when I was growing up. So what do you mean you don't know what a cartoon is?
Yeah, immediately no.
Is that actually becoming normal? Because when you look at what kids are watching now, a lot of the media that used to be built specifically for them seems to be disappearing. So instead, kids are increasingly consuming the same content as adults, which made my question shift from why don't kids watch cartoons anymore to something that's a little bit bigger. What actually happened to kids media? What's up, YouTube? I'm tinysey, and if you are new here, thank you so much for dropping in. I hope you like it. Plenty of videos for you to watch, so feel free to peruse and check it out. And if you're returning, thank you so much for coming back. It's March. We made it to a new month. And yeah, I'm hoping to get a lot of content out this month. I kind of fell off last month, but that was because February was just weirdly busy. But yeah, I have a lot planned for this month. I hope you guys like this one. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and welcome to my digital garden. To answer today's question, we actually have to go back to around 1955, because what I didn't know before I started researching all of this was that the whole idea of media made specifically for children was actually pretty new, like historically. Before TV, kids obviously had things that were targeted towards them, like books and fairy tales. They even had radio shows, but that didn't necessarily foster a shared culture among them. They didn't have any character that every kid in America could name, like we did back in the 90s and 2000s. There also wasn't any consensus around what kids were actually watching. So kids just consumed whatever adults were consuming, and nobody asked whether something was age appropriate, because that wasn't necessarily a category that was invented yet. But when television entered the picture, the idea that media could be a tool for raising children became a lot more popular.
Hey kids, what time is it? Say howdy
The idea that you could create content with a kid's development in mind became very popular, but it wasn't executed that well at first. Because, as you would guess, living in this capitalistic society, the people who were the most excited about this was not your educators, it was not your child psychologists, it was the toy companies. So in the 70s and 80s, the Saturday morning cartoon lineup was mostly run by the toy companies. Shows like He-Man and Transformers, G.I. Joe, My Little Pony, they existed because a toy company needed a 30-minute commercial that kids would actually sit through. Then we finally arrived to the golden era, or the heyday of Nickelodeon, Disney Channel, and Cartoon Network in the 90s and 2000s. And this actually wasn't the beginning of kids media, because as we just discussed, they did try to make kids media. It's just that it was pretty much just an ad. So this was more of a correction from that first attempt. Nickelodeon in particular, under a woman named Geraldine Laybourne, made the executive decision in the late 80s and early 90s to invest in more original creative programming that wasn't actually just built around a product. And that was a very wise decision. So they invested in a lot more shows that were actually trying to be good for children. They were written for kids, but they weren't condescending to them. And I think some of my favorites were Rugrats, Hey Arnold, Cat Dog. These shows were a genuine creative attempt and investment into what a child's inner world actually might look like. And I loved anything that was created by Emily Kapnick. She was the creator of As Told by Ginger, and she wrote for Rocket Power. I actually wanted to live inside of these shows. That's how good they were to me as a kid. She just did such a good job of connecting with children at that age. And it wasn't even just that there were these TV shows that were for kids, because by the 90s and early 2000s, children had their own culture. Like, the idea of children having a dedicated space was heavily invested into. Nickelodeon, Disney Channel, Cartoon Network, there were these three entire cable channels running almost 24 hours a day with nothing but kids content. I had these channels like memorized: 380, 381, and 296. There were also the Saturday morning cartoons like Pokemon, tween magazines like Tiger Beat and J14, Kids Bop, tween idols like Hannah Montana. We had movie stars, Mary-Kate and Ashley, and their entire career was built around being safe role models for children. So there was a complete ecosystem: TV, music, magazines, merchandise, concerts, just for kids and tweens specifically. And it really did feel like every kid was watching the same show, reading the same magazines, obsessing over the same artists, and we were all quoting SpongeBob. I'm sure adults probably thought something was wrong with us, but that hadn't really existed before, at least not in that fashion. And come to find out, it actually needed a very specific set of conditions in order to survive, because this space was deliberately built over around 50 years. And now we're seeing that the economics around it hasn't really been working the same as it used to. I never really used to watch what me and my sisters would call real people shows growing up, but in the third grade, all my friends were talking about Hannah Montana, and she is the best case study for the business model that was working back then. She was the peak of tween marketing, but also a very good example for why it stopped working. Hannah Montana debuted on Disney Channel on March 24th, 2006, and there were 5.4 million viewers that were tuned in.
Miley Stewart has a secret.
I'm Hannah Montana. I'm Hannah Montana.
Maybe not so much.
I'm Hannah Montana, for crying out loud.
Hannah Montana on Disney Channel.
This was the highest rated premiere in the Disney Channel's history at that point, and like I said, I didn't even watch those type of shows, and all the hype got me to watch. That's how much people were talking about it. The show quickly started averaging 3.5 million viewers per episode, and Disney, being Disney and seeing those numbers, decided to capitalize on that. You can kind of say that Hannah Montana really fortified this business model. She may not have been the first, but I do think she was the most successful version up until that point. She had predecessors like Britney Spears, but I think Hannah Montana really took it to that next level because she also had her own show. So the formula pretty much went like this. They would take a charismatic young hopeful, in this case it was Miley Cyrus, who at the time was 13 years old, and you build a show around them. And then that show will make them into a star, and the star will then start to release music on Disney Channel's record label or the radio. They go on tour with it. The tour will sell merchandise, and that merchandise ends up at a store like Walmart. And fun fact, Disney actually had their own Walmart team. I guess at that time Walmart Smart really understood that tween demographic and how much money it could make them. And this whole model was very profitable. It's kind of like how the toy companies decided to build a show around their toys so kids would buy more of their toys, but this time they're building a show and then selling toys once that show becomes popular. And with this system, they also get a kid-friendly role model out of it that they can look up to. And of course, it wasn't just Miley, because this was a whole system. We had Zac Efron and Vanessa Hudgens from High School Musical the very same year, Selena Gomez from Wizards of Waverly Place, Demi Lovato from Camp Rock, the Jonas Brothers. These were manufactured role models, and the company made sure it was very, very controlled, branded, and age appropriate on purpose. And the Disney execs who were overseeing Hannah Montana literally described keeping Miley as a good girl as a good business decision. And the key thing that was making this all work was that these stars were very aspirational but also accessible. When you were younger, you wanted to be them. It's like how kids feel about influencers and streamers nowadays. The shows were very relatable because Miley Cyrus was just a regular girl who had a secret. She went to school, she had friends, friend drama, dating drama, but she also just happened to be a pop star, and that made it so you trusted her. And Disney made sure nothing she did would ever be inappropriate for a 10-year-old. And the tween space, which essentially is that period between Dora the Explorer and adult pop culture, was very much thriving, and Disney had it on lock. So if they were so successful in having millions of viewers an episode, what actually happened? Well, it turns out a lot of things happened. First of all, the rise of streaming absolutely ruined the ad-supported cable model that made Disney Channel and Nickelodeon so profitable in the first place. And when kids moved off that linear TV model, the economics of investing in a show also collapsed right along with it. So Disney Channel went from nearly 2 million average viewers in 2014 to only 132,000 by 2023. There are YouTubers like Mr. Beast who are doing those numbers in a few minutes, a few seconds actually. They pretty much lost over 90% of their audience in less than a decade, and Nickelodeon also fell by 86% during this same time period. But it's not just that the viewership was dropping, it's that the whole business model around creating a role model and then investing a whole bunch of money in them stopped working, because that whole Hannah Montana model required a huge amount of upfront investment into one singular person. So they needed to be sure that whoever they chose would stay on brand, maintain their popularity, and stay out of scandals for many, many years. And of course, in pre-social media era, Disney could manage that because they controlled the press access. They also managed their image. But now with the internet and phones being so advanced, it's very hard to execute in the same fashion. Now you can get photographed, filmed, quoted out of context. It literally happens all the time, and it can end your career overnight. So the risk versus reward has completely changed. And you can really see how things transitioned if you look at the full timeline. Hannah Montana wrapped in 2011, the Jonas Brothers broke up in 2013, Selena and Demi both moved into adult territory by the mid-2010s, Casey Undercover ended in 2018, and after that, the pipeline pretty much ended. The last credible heir to the tween throne, in the Western market at least, might be JoJo Siwa. And even she has aged out of it. So since then, we haven't had anything. No one has really filled that slot to the same magnitude that we saw back in the day. So for kids and tweens nowadays, let's say you're 10 years old, you're too old for Cocomelon, but you're also still too young for Sabrina Carpenter. So that middle space, the space that Disney Channel used to own for 20 years, is pretty much gone. So naturally, something is going to replace it, because otherwise, that's just money left on the table. One of the main platforms that seem to be taking over this newly found space is YouTube.
YouTube is now the most watched streaming platform on television, right? It's surpassed Netflix. It's surpassed all these other streaming platforms.
In 10 years, YouTube's going to be bigger than television ever was, for culture, in America at least.
And I came to the conclusion, I'm like, okay, YouTube's the new TV.
And YouTube was not designed for children. If you know your YouTube history, YouTube Kids was only created in February of 2015. So kind of right around that time that the Disney bubble was popping. But YouTube originally was built for adults. Its terms of service technically require users to be 13 or older just to have an account. And yet, according to 2019 Common Sense Media Census, 76% of kids aged 8 to 12 say they use the main YouTube platform, not YouTube Kids, YouTube. And as you all might know, there are all types of videos on here: conspiracy theories, horror content, hours of unmoderated commentary, or really anything that you can imagine. And 3 out of 4 kids in that age range of 8 to 12 are on here regularly. By 2020, Common Sense Media Census found that watching online video had become the single largest category of screen time for children under 8. More than traditional TV, more than games, and more than movies. And the vast majority of those online videos were on YouTube. Another thing about YouTube is that it doesn't know how old you are. The algorithm doesn't really distinguish between a 7-year-old and a 37-year-old. It just knows what you clicked on, how long you watched, and what kept you on the platform. So it's going to be optimizing for those metrics, and they want to keep you hooked like all social media companies. So a child can start out by watching something that's very neutral, like maybe a Minecraft video or a clip from a cartoon. And then autoplay eventually starts to kick in, and the next video after that might be a little bit more intense, a little more engaging, a little bit more who knows.
To show you how Ballerina Cappuccino took me from Bluey to an AI video that depicts the worst thing I can imagine on a kid's feed, and somehow I'm still shocked despite this being day 10 of these tests. I searched for Ballerina Cappuccino, and that was all it took. If you don't know about Italian brain rot, it's very popular for kids. And after just watching 3 of those shorts, I went back to the homepage, and the first video was fine, but then the second video was a cat video. Like instant. I literally cannot tell you or show you what's in this video. I'll show little snippets that are not the graphic part, but there is a scene depicting the worst type of act towards a woman. Yeah. It's really bad.
And the algorithm learned that slightly more intense content actually holds attention a little bit longer. So that's what might get pushed to them. And each recommendation is engineered to be more engaging than the last one that you watch. I don't think they intended for users to go from Bluey to something a 7-year-old probably shouldn't be watching, but that's kind of just what's happening. And I wouldn't say this is quite like when previous generations were panicking about what kids were watching, because I don't know, this is a little bit different. They used to worry about kids seeing Elvis and violent video games or explicit music and things like that. But in order for a kid to see that, they actually had to actively seek it out, or a parent would have to have accidentally permitted access. And that's because there were way less avenues to access and see these sorts of things without a parental's consent or some sort of parental access. So that's why I would say right now is a little bit different, because the algorithm is so easy to access, especially since every kid seems to have an iPad. And the thing is, we know YouTube is aware of this dynamic because the federal government had to step in 2019.
FTC is fining YouTube $136 million to settle allegations that it collected kids' personal data without their parents' consent. Google, YouTube's parent company, will also have to pay an additional $34 million to the state of New York to resolve similar allegations. It's the largest fine the FTC has ever levied against Google. Earlier this year, the FTC fined Facebook $5 billion for privacy violations.
The FTC's complaint was that YouTube had marketed itself to toy companies like Mattel and Hasbro as the premier destination for reaching kids age 6 to 11. But then on the other side, they were also saying to advertisers that they had no users under 13 and therefore didn't need to comply with the children's privacy law. So essentially, they were selling children to advertisers, but publicly acting as though they didn't have any children on the platform. And YouTube Kids was supposed to be the solution to all of this, a child-safe alternative. But a 2020 Common Sense study found that 27% of videos that are watched by children under 8 on YouTube Kids contain content intended for older audiences, mainly violence. So it wasn't actually even that safe. And then we started to see an entirely new category of entertainer on the YouTube platform, the kid creator. And I think the most famous example is probably Ryan Kaji, who started a YouTube channel at 3 years old. He was making videos unboxing toys with his parents, and by 2019, he was the highest paid creator on all of YouTube.
When you think of who could be the richest YouTuber, who do you think of? Probably not a kid, but that's exactly who tops the list. Take a look. According to Forbes, Ryan Kaji made $26 million this year from his YouTube channel. It's a lot of money for someone who's 8 years old, and a lot of money for anyone who's even 80 years old. Anybody.
He was pretty much making more money than almost every movie star in Hollywood. He was actually filling a hole in the market. Kids watched him because they could see themselves in him. He was a peer. He was was young. He played how they played. But he also was blurring the line between entertainment and advertising, because 90% of his early videos were paid product placements, and they were aimed at children who were too young to even really understand the difference between a review and a commercial. And so the FTC filed a complaint about this. But either way, this is what that hole in the market ended up getting filled with. Not another Disney Channel, not another Nickelodeon, not another Hannah Montana, a recommendation algorithm with no concept of age appropriateness at all, and a generation of creators that are optimizing for clicks. I guess kind of like the rest of creators on the platform, but from children who haven't gone through the development to recognize what's actually happening to them. Now, we also have to talk about what's left of the more traditional media for kids, because it is still there, it's still playing, it's still going. The shows that are surviving still are either aimed at like ages 6 and younger, so shows like Bluey, Peppa Pig, Cocomelon, Paw Patrol, or they're aimed at elementary aged and up, but it tends to be very loud and chaotic, dumbed down. A lot of the shows seem to be very overstimulating on purpose, and it's probably because of what they are competing against. It's not necessarily other cartoons like we discussed, it's things like Skibbity Toilet. And if you haven't encountered Skibbity Toilet, first of all, congratulations. But it's a YouTube series with no real plot, very loud audio, super weird visuals involving human heads inside of toilet bowls, and it's quite popular with the children. It doesn't really make sense to me, but I also doubt that it's aimed at my age range. It's very much sensory overload, and the kids are crazy for it because their attention has been calibrated by years of autoplay, shorts, and content specifically designed to be as stimulating as possible in the smallest amount of time. And this had a visible effect on what cartoons even look like right now. So I want to talk about the original Teen Titans, the 2003 version. It had an actual continuous plot line. They were going against real villains. There were emotional episodes. The characters grew and changed over time. To me, it was kind of like a Justice League, but for kids, and I loved Justice League. So I ate Teen Titans up. Now, Teen Titans Go, the 2013 reboot, is technically the same characters, but there is no plot continuity. At least it's not the same from the episodes that I've been able to see. It's a lot of jokes and it's very overstimulating compared to the previous version. The characters are just like completely different, much shallower versions of themselves. And I could just be feeling nostalgic, but I also feel like that shift was intentional. That is what the data shows that kids are watching. And it's also what the algorithm rewards. So it probably was actually really intentional. And then we have the SpongeBob movie that came out in 2025, December of 2025. And there's been a lot of discourse about this movie for multiple reasons. First, I heard about the billboard of SpongeBob in a very suggestive pose.
Hey, what you doing?
I'm busy.
How busy would you say you are on a scale of 8 to 9?
And the movie also seemed to have a lot more crude humor. And I didn't watch it myself, but I was seeing the discourse online. And there were two main opinions about this movie. Some people felt like it was inappropriate for children. And I think the other side, which may have mostly been people who grew up with the older version of SpongeBob, felt like SpongeBob had always been like this. This is always how SpongeBob was. And then we have me. I think that both are right. The original SpongeBob did have a lot of crude jokes. There were moments that probably were hidden in there for the adults watching and were supposed to kind of go over our heads. That definitely was part of the show, and I think the difference was that in the original run, or the older version, the adult humor was more sprinkled in there. It was the subtext. You could watch the show as a kid and have a great time, and then maybe when you get older and you rewatch an episode, you realize how crude the humor actually kind of was. But in the 2025 movie, they are putting that front and center, especially with that SpongeBob billboard. And I tried to look for the old SpongeBob movie marketing, and I couldn't find anything like that. So I really do think things have changed. They're leading with that side of SpongeBob. It's not as subtle as it was before. And why? Because that's what the data shows that kids are responding to. That's what's getting clicks, and that's also what's getting shared. Kids are spending so much time in the adult internet that the references that land with them have to be a little bit more crude than they used to. I know as a kid, potty humor was always a thing, but it wasn't so in your face, especially on the television. Maybe in person with your friends, but not on the kids shows. And my theory is that because the gap between kids content and adult content has narrowed so much, this is what marketing for children's movies has to look like, or the kids won't want to see it. Which brings us to the whole Ice Spice's outfit at the SpongeBob premiere thing, because this was such a huge talking point. She sang the title track for the movie, so naturally she was going to show up to the premiere, but she showed up in an outfit that by any measure of the last 30 years of what somebody would wear to a children's movie premiere was not, the typical movie premiere outfit. And people were calling her out for that, but they also were calling out the SpongeBob team. Like, how could they allow this at a SpongeBob premiere where children are present? Again, if you are following everything that we've been talking about so far, the outrage didn't really make sense to me. Well, I guess it does make sense on paper, but I guess I'll just say that what happened shouldn't have been so surprising because kids already know who Ice Spice is. Northwest invited her to her house to hang out when she was like probably 11 or 12 years old. She dressed up like her. They were hanging out. She very much was meeting her idol. And again, she was 11 or 12 years old. So kids already know how she dresses. They probably saw the Munch music video. And if you've seen that music video, it's not for kids, but they probably saw it because she's part of their media diet. The algorithm doesn't filter by age, and there's no tween media ecosystem left to give them an alternative. So with that framing, the SpongeBob team didn't accidentally book somebody that was inappropriate for children. They made a deliberate, calculated decision to feature an artist who their actual audience, the kids who are going to see the SpongeBob movie, already love. And that audience doesn't experience Ice Spice as adult content, although to us, she may be. To them, she's just a popular rapper. Now, this used to be the Jonas Brothers or Miley Cyrus who would have done the title track for a kids movie, but now it's Ice Spice, and no one's asking her to dial anything back because the people that are booking her already know that's where the kids are. That's what the kids are watching. So now that we have a better understanding of what children are actually watching right now, let's bring it back home. That kid in the TikTok that didn't know what a cartoon is, he's actually not failing some cultural literacy test. He's just living life how 12-year-olds do nowadays. The world we grew up in is sadly no longer here. I mean, sadly for me, I'm sure kids are fine. The 50-year experiment in building a dedicated media space for children with the Saturday morning cartoons and Disney Channel and tween magazines, the Jonas Brothers, all of those things, that experiment ran on a specific set of economic conditions, like we talked about. Ad-supported linear cable, a tween market that was not being tapped into yet, and an era where controlling what kids saw was actually going to be possible because there were only a few pipes that the content came through, TV and maybe an old-ass computer. And during that time, it was easier to put gatekeepers in all of those avenues. But a lot of those conditions has changed. Streaming ended the whole cable model. Social media gave kids direct access to whatever adults are engaging with. The algorithm replaced that team of executives that used to decide what and who children were going to watch. And the algorithm has no parenting instincts. It has no age consciousness, no sense of obligation to serve a child's developmental needs over just being engaged. And the economics of building the Hannah Montana machine, of investing millions into one person in hopes that they become a star and then managing them like a brand for years, isn't really working anymore because a random kid on TikTok can get the same amount of views as a Disney Channel pilot would before lunchtime. So what we're left with is something that looks like the pre-TV era. Kids are consuming adult media by default because adult media is everywhere and extremely accessible, and children's media that somewhat thinks about what an 8-year-old might need isn't really being subsidized the same way that it used to. But there is a slight difference this time because the adult media that they were absorbing in the 1940s was radio dramas and John Wayne movies. And the adult media that they're absorbing now is an infinite scroll algorithm that, you know, you have access to anything in the world that you could possibly want to see. Now, I'm not going to say this is all total doom and gloom, because even when I was growing up, we had a lot of access. It's probably more access now, but there was also a lot of access back then, and kids will always find a way. Let me tell you, they will find a way to see something they're not supposed to see. And I think we turned out decently. Human beings are a lot more resilient than moral panic will ever suggest, but it's also not like children aren't losing anything. We're losing that idea behind children having a dedicated space, or that they deserve a dedicated space in culture that is built for them at their level and will somewhat grow with them as they grow up. That space is definitely shrinking, and someone will have to figure out a new model that works to sustain that sort of thing, which I'm sure will be very hard in this age of streaming and algorithms and infinite content. But that's all that I have for this topic today. There was so many things that I actually wanted to cover that I couldn't put in because it just would have been way too long. But if you guys end up liking this video, maybe I can do like a part 2 type of thing. If I have children, I'm going to make them watch 90s cartoons because they really are top tier. I feel like they're way better, but I'm biased. What do you guys think about how children's media has changed over the years? I'm very interested to hear you guys' thoughts. If you made it this far in the video, please post the cloud emoji. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.